She was calm, she was smiling, she was underwater. Alina Park was a seasoned orca trainer, admired by her colleagues, loved by the whales she worked beside, and trusted by the institution that employed her. On July 8, 2002, she entered the water at SeaWorld San Diego for a routine morning session, one she had done countless times before. The whales, Orchid and Splash, were familiar, trained, and under control. Nothing felt unusual, nothing felt off. But within minutes, the calm dissolved into terror. Without warning, the animals she considered companions turned on her. Orchid struck first, Splash followed, and Alina vanished beneath the surface, dragged by two 5-ton predators in opposite directions. 30 seconds of silence, of blood, of chaos. This wasn't an accident. This was a moment SeaWorld never wanted you to hear about. A moment that shattered the illusion of harmony between trainer and whale. This is not just a story of survival, it's a story of warnings ignored, of voices silenced, and of a system that chose spectacle over safety. This is When the Water Turned Red, the tragic fall of Alina Park. At SeaWorld San Diego, Alina Park wasn't just a trainer, she was a leader. At 28 years old, she had earned the respect of her peers, the admiration of new recruits, and most importantly, the trust of the whales she worked with. Her bond with Orchid and Splash was the result of years of commitment, endless hours in and out of the water, learning their behavior, understanding their signals, building trust that seemed unbreakable. Orchid, a 14-year-old female orca born in captivity, was known for intelligence, quick learning, and an assertiveness that sometimes surfaced during training. Splash, a massive male transferred from another SeaWorld park, was powerful and majestic, but carried a complicated past. Alina respected them both. She didn't fear them. She trusted them. But behind the curtain of perfectly choreographed shows and smiling trainers, darker truths lingered. Trainers had seen Orchid test boundaries before. There were whispers, hushed conversations in locker rooms, side glances during meetings. Incidents happened, warnings were logged, but there was always another show, always another smile. July 8th was supposed to be just another morning. The park hadn't opened yet. Alina walked into Shamu Stadium, as she always did, calm, confident, and unaware that the next few minutes would change everything. In the pool, Orchid and Splash glided through the water. Today's session was simple, reinforcement training, no audience, no pressure, just conditioning and trust. But trust doesn't guarantee safety, and routine can be dangerously deceptive. The session began normally. Alina offered vocal cues. Orchid responded. Splash circled below. From the deck, everything appeared controlled, just another day at SeaWorld. But then, a shift. It was subtle. A posture, a look, a delay in response. For most eyes, nothing seemed wrong, but something had changed. Without a single warning sound, Orchid turned and clamped her massive jaws around Alina's foot. In the same heartbeat, Splash surged upward, taking hold of her other side. She was ripped underwater, twisted, torn between two forces she once called partners. Deck trainers shouted, radios sparked, recall alarms echoed through the stadium, but Orchid and Splash didn't let go. Alina was out of sight, her silhouette flickering beneath the surface. The water, once clear, began to churn. Bubbles, then blood. 30 seconds passed, and during those 30 seconds, one of SeaWorld's most experienced trainers was drowning in the pool she had once called home. What made the whales stop? What pulled Alina back to the surface? And more importantly, what had gone so wrong? If this gripped you, press the red subscribe button and turn on notifications for more updates. When Alina finally broke the surface, she was barely alive. Her body floated, limp and contorted. Blood rose around her. One arm hung shattered, twisted unnaturally with a bone protruding through torn skin. Her foot was mangled, bruises and bite marks painted her torso, but she was conscious, gasping, in shock. Trainers rushed to her aid. Emergency stretchers were deployed. The crowd near the backstage area stood frozen, unable to understand what they were seeing. But those who looked closely would remember the blood on the pool deck and the silence that followed as Alina was rushed through the service gate toward urgent care. At the trauma center, doctors worked for hours to stabilize her. Metal pins held her arm together, ligaments were reattached. Her body had survived, barely. But what had survived with it was a storm of questions SeaWorld hoped would never be asked. Inside corporate offices, the narrative was already being rewritten. Executives huddled behind closed doors. Language was softened. Press statements were drafted. The public would hear nothing about aggression, nothing about the recall signal, nothing about two whales dragging a trainer into the deep. The event, they decided, would be labeled a training mishap. And just like that, the silence began. Alina's story was reshaped into a footnote, another routine injury. But the truth was far from routine. Internal reports showed a disturbing pattern. Orchid had a documented history of testing limits. Splash had previously ignored commands. Trainers had raised concerns. Logs had been written. But the warnings had always been brushed aside. The show had to go on. And now, SeaWorld had a crisis it couldn't admit. Alina remained in the hospital, undergoing surgery after surgery, then months of physical therapy. But she never returned to the stage, she never gave interviews. And quietly, without fanfare, Alina Park left the water behind, forever. To those closest to her, the silence spoke louder than words. One colleague later said, "We all knew it could have been any of us." Another remembered seeing her pulled from the water, bloodied and broken, and realizing for the first time the whales weren't just unpredictable, they were dangerous. And yet, SeaWorld's response wasn't accountability, it was containment. The same whales remained in rotation. Orchid kept performing. Splash continued training. Their names stayed off headlines. The illusion of safety stayed intact, at least publicly. But behind the scenes, something had changed. Trainers grew more cautious. Conversations shifted from choreography to control. The tension was real now, unspoken but present in every dive, every cue, every second in the water. What happened to Alina Park wasn't just a horrifying moment, it was a crack in the foundation. And for SeaWorld, that crack was growing. The attack on Alina Park didn't just leave physical scars, it left behind a trail of questions that would eventually unravel an entire industry. And yet, for a while, SeaWorld carried on as if nothing had happened. Orchid, the same whale who bit down and dragged Alina to the bottom, continued performing in shows. Her name appeared on schedules. She swam to thunderous applause. But behind the curtain, her record showed a different story. Documents obtained years later revealed she had been involved in multiple prior incidents. In one, she yanked a trainer underwater by the ponytail. In another, she failed to respond to critical recall cues. Splash, too, remained in SeaWorld's rotation. His role was adjusted over time, his aggression quietly ignored. Eventually, he was retired. But not for safety reasons, for health and age. Alina's attack had been buried, rebranded, erased. The public never saw the emergency recall cue, never heard how close she came to death. The official story spoke only of a routine injury. But inside the training rooms, a shift was happening. Trainers began to speak. Off the record, behind closed doors. Some were scared, others were furious, most were disillusioned. SeaWorld's culture of silence was beginning to crack, and in 2013, the break finally came. Blackfish, a documentary that pulled back the curtain, gave the world a glimpse into the lives of captive orcas and the risks faced by their trainers. It was in those frames, in those pages of training logs and testimonies, that Alina's name quietly appeared. She never told her story, but she didn't have to. Her record spoke volumes. Her silence became symbolic. She was the one who lived, the one who could have spoken, and the one whose absence haunted every scene. She hadn't just been dragged by two killer whales. She had been betrayed by the system that was supposed to protect her. In time, Alina's case would be studied by regulators, reviewed in safety reports, whispered about in conferences. She had survived, but she had also been silenced. And in that silence, a question echoed louder than ever. How many other incidents had been buried? How many stories like hers would never be told? In the aftermath of Blackfish, changes came. Federal oversight increased. SeaWorld eventually banned in-water performances with orcas. Platforms were raised. Barriers were added. The illusion had cracked. But for Alina, it was already too late. The pool she once trusted had turned against her, and the institution she served had let her fall. Her story wasn't supposed to matter, but it did, because in the silence, in the absence, in the red-tinged waters of that July morning, the truth was waiting, and now it could no longer be ignored.